convertibles started at a very early age. My dad had always had convertibles when he was a young man, and so when I was born, he actually owned a 66 Impala SS. And then my mom wrecked that car, and so then he got a Pontiac Catalina, but the one that I remember best is his 73 Cougar XR7. It was gold with this white vinyl, and I loved riding around in that car with him. Then, of course, nobody made convertibles for a while. And then in the late 1980s, when I was in college, I dated a girl who had a red Jeep CJ7, and we spent an entire summer riding around Western Michigan with the top off and the doors off, and I was just hooked. I loved how driving that Jeep immersed me in the environment, how you could feel the temperature changes and how you could smell the different scents of nature around you, and it was just phenomenal to be driving a car and just be immersed in your surroundings that way. And then I started test driving cars for my job in the mid-1990s, and I got a chance to drive a lot of convertibles, but it was a Miata that stole my heart. And here's what happened. At the time, I worked for a company that you now would know as Edmunds.com, and I lived in Phoenix, and Edmunds was based in Los Angeles, and I had 3 consecutive business trips scheduled back and forth across the desert 3 weeks in a row because we were editing some books that we were sending to the publisher. So I land in Burbank Airport the first trip, and the guy behind the rental car counter, I had an Escort reserved or something like that, and the guy behind the rental counter asked me if I wanted something fun to drive. So first he offered me a Mustang, and I'd driven Mustangs before, so I said no. Then he offered me a Ford Probe. You remember that car? And I knew it was going to be a 4-cylinder with an automatic, so I said no. And then he said, well, I've got a Miata out there. I put 4,000 miles in 3 weeks on that rented white Miata. I drove it all over Arizona, all over California. I just loved driving that car. And we're talking about a rental with an automatic transmission, mind you. This thing didn't even have a manual gearbox. And I knew that one day I was going to own one of those. Now, over the course of the next several years through work, I got to drive a lot of different Miatas. In fact, here's a picture of me behind the wheel of a 1997 M Edition. You can see my hair was a little bit darker at the time, and I didn't weigh quite as much. But it wasn't until Auto Week magazine came out with a cover story of the redesigned Miata that I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger. I really didn't like the blurry spy photos that they had published, the exposed headlights. I really wanted the little pop-ups. So I went to the dealership in my town. I lived in Denver at the time, and bought a 1997 Miata STO edition. Mazda called it still the one. A lot of other people tend to say stuff taken off, because it was just like the previous year's M Edition, except it had twilight blue mica paint and less equipment on it. But I gotta tell you, I loved that paint color, I loved the tan leather, I loved the silver 5-spoke wheels, the little lip spoiler on the back, and I owned number 672 of 1,500 made. They were among the last first-gen Miatas off the line, and I adored that car. I stupidly sold it because of economic concerns after a round of layoffs at work. Never should have done that. Now, after the STO edition, I ended up buying the 2001 special edition, the British Racing Green model with the chrome wheels. Then after that, I had a red 2003. It was black leather. It had the really nice silver 5-spoke wheels on it. And then after that, I bought my gray Mazda Speed Edition. Now, I just loved the look of that car. I loved the fact that it was the most powerful Miata ever made. And I bought one right off the showroom floor, paid $7,000 under sticker because of the discounts that were happening at the end of the year. And I've still got that car today. So it's been half a decade since I've driven a brand new Miata, and now we're in the 2016 MX-5 Miata, the Club Edition. It's the performance tune model. It's got a strut brace underneath the hood. It's got a sport tune suspension. It's got different wheels and tires. It's got a sound enhancement system for the exhaust. Now on top of that, my test car has got the Brembo brake and BBS wheel and tire package. It's got an appearance package. It's got extra cost Soul Red paint, a couple of other add-ons, and the sticker price is $34,400 for a Miata. Now, that is staggering. I agree. But if you think about it this way, that what you're basically getting here is a half-price Porsche Boxster, suddenly there's all the value in the world associated with this car. Now, I'm not just making things up here to justify the cost of this particular test vehicle. I've driven plenty of Porsche Boxsters and Caymans, and this new Miata is every bit as fun to drive. Now, the thing to remember is that this car this year is smaller and lighter than it was before. It weighs 2,332 pounds. And I thought for sure that I was going to be sitting here complaining about how it needs a turbocharger, how it's not fast enough. But the reality is that 155 horsepower gives this car plenty of get up and go. We're going 70 miles an hour already. And I wasn't even revving it all the way to 7 grand. Now you combine that kind of acceleration with the nimbleness and the athleticism that's inherent in this platform and in this car, and you've got a joyful driving experience unlike just about any other, especially at the price point. Now, I've been driving this car for a week. I put over 500 miles on it. I've been driving it just like that at almost every chance I've gotten. And I'm getting like 29.5 miles per gallon. The EPA says I should be getting 30. I think that's extraordinary. I mean, especially compared to my Mazda speed, which is a relative gas guzzler. I usually only get like 22 or 23 out of that thing. So I think that Mazda's made a smart move putting this 2-liter in here. It's very fuel efficient. It's got plenty of power. Makes the car tremendously fun to drive. And I highly recommend the Club model for that limited slip differential, because when you're powering this thing out of a corner, it really helps to just sling it from S-curve to S-curve. It's fantastic. Now, there are a few things about the new Miata that I don't like as much as my Mazda speed. Number one on that list is I don't like the ball shifter as much as the pistol grip style shifter that's in my car. It's not terrible, mind you, I just don't like the way it feels in my hand as much. I'm also not necessarily a fan of the Miata's electric steering. Don't get me wrong, for electric steering, it's fantastic. But it's not as sharp or as quick as what's in my Mazda speed. It doesn't feel as alive in my hands. And so, in comparison to my own car, it doesn't quite meet the standard. And it's usually only when I'm traveling on a freeway at highway speeds and I want to make some fine-tuned adjustments where that really comes into play. The rest of the time, especially when I'm on a twisty back road, it's not even an issue. One thing that is an issue related to the steering on twisty back roads is in my Mazda speed, my elbows don't hit the center console as I'm steering through turns. In this car, that happens all the time. I also prefer the higher seating position in my Mazda speed. This car, it's got a lower center of gravity, the seating position's a little bit lower, and I feel more snugged down in this vehicle. In my Miata, I feel like I'm sitting up higher and I've got a more expansive, broader view of my surroundings, and I feel more immersed in the driving experience. But look, in terms of the engineering, this new Miata is a clearly superior automobile compared to my own car. I mean, structurally,